Hi, everyone. It's Coach Sandra. And today we're going to be talking about your fears and apprehensions around setting appointments. Now, I got some really interesting questions and concerns from you guys. And what I learned is that it falls into one of three categories. And what are those three categories? Well, the first one is fear of rejection. The second one is fear of the unknown or fear of not knowing. And then the last category is feeling unmotivated. And I thought that was kind of interesting how everybody had a slight different spin on it, but that is how they all got categorized. So we're going to be addressing each of these items one at a time, and we're going to look at what is that fear, why would we have that fear, and last but not least, how do we overcome it? Okay, so let's talk about the first category, which is fear of rejection. So what is that fear? Fear of rejection is actually, it's the most common of all of the fears that you guys have in and around booking appointments or even making contacts. And yet, those are the two things that we require in order to make money in this business. But it is a very common one. So if you are experiencing this, please know that you are absolutely not alone. And this fear can look like, or can come across like, what if they don't like me? Or what if I'm bothering them? I've even heard some agents say to me that they feel like predators, when they're talking to people, they feel like they're out there hunting for their business. And that all stems and bunches up into a ball of what I call fear of rejection. So that's what the fear is. Now, why do we have this fear? The reason why we have this fear is because when we are approaching clients or doing a listing presentation or a buyer showing, I don't want to say that you're the center of attention because that's just going to exasperate your fears, but you are. You are the leader in this particular situation and all eyes are on you. And so because all eyes are on you, that just makes us feel very, very uncomfortable. And it shouldn't, because you guys really are great agents. And when you are prepared, you can't go wrong. So that is why we have the fear. Now, here's the challenge though. When you've got this fear, it could populate into things like where you appear to be unauthentic, right? You're so nervous and you're so tight with anxiety that you come across not being your usual self. And you risk looking unauthentic. I'll get that word right eventually. The other thing that can happen is people pleasing when we fear rejection, right? We just want to go out of our way. Now, going the extra mile in business and wowing people with service is not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about where you're ignoring your own needs. And allowing people to cross boundaries that they shouldn't be crossing. And you're swallowing all of those emotions because you don't want to be rejected. So you're pleasing, 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 and then you're swallowing and ignoring, what it is that you need. And then what ends up happening is you probably will start to show some passive aggressive, reactions to certain situations. So these are things that we have to be aware of. Now that we've talked about, what this fear is and why do we have it, we need to address how we're going to overcome it. And the good news is I've actually got a few steps here for you guys. I've got 5, and the steps are: number 1, accept it. Number 2, validate your feelings. Number 3, know your worth. Number 4, be aware of that negative self-talk. And last but not least, I know it sounds simple, but practice having conversations regularly. Okay, so let's review those just very, very briefly. So accept that you do this, accept that you feel afraid to be rejected, and be gentle with yourself. This is where you've got to nourish that emotion, because remember, we are dealing with an emotional reaction to a situation. And because we need to make appointments, we need to overcome this fear. We need to grow emotionally. We need to heighten our emotional intelligence so that when we are when we are reacting emotionally to a situation, we can actually shift how it is that we're doing business and not be fearing any rejection at all. And yes, you can do that. So you want to be gentle with yourself and nourish how you're feeling. The second tip was, validate your feelings and also be aware. Be very aware of what triggers you, right? So be aware of how much people pleasing you're doing. Be aware of how exhausted that makes you feel. Be aware of, do you feel, a little bit resentful, or you start criticizing that client? And that's simply because you've pushed boundaries. You allowed that to happen. So we need to be aware of how we're feeling so that we can actually grow emotionally and overcome this fear. Tip number 3 is a super easy one. Know your worth. Notches in your belt don't make a great realtor. Just because you have 30 deals, or maybe you have 0 deals, that does not make you a great realtor. What makes a great realtor is how authentic you are, how interested you are in the client that you're dealing with, and how, even if you don't have the answer, you go searching for it for them because you want to make sure that this becomes a stress-free type of deal for them. So know your worth, okay? Notches in your belt don't make you a great realtor. And of course, last but not least is be aware of that, oh no, that's not the last one. Be aware of your self-talk, that negative talk where your mind is not your friend. That's not a good thing either. Those are, I hear thoughts from my agents all the time, and it really hurts my heart because they don't deserve that. And if they were talking to their very best friend, they would not speak to their very best friend in the manner that they speak to themselves, right? So if you had a really good friend going through what you're going through, would you speak to your best friend, or a stranger for that matter, with that same self-talk that you're giving yourself? Would you use that same language with them? And the answer is no, you would not. So the key here is to be mindful of that self-talk. Don't start arguing with it, but just remind yourself to speak to yourself as if you are that best friend that needs that support. Last but not least, because I goofed with this one, is talk to people regularly. And I know that sounds really, really super easy and maybe obvious. The thing is, though, talking to people, making connections will help you overcome rejection, especially when you shift the perspective of your intention. If your intention is not necessarily to get an appointment, your intention is to make a business connection, to commence a business relationship, to be of support in someone's journey. When you shift that perspective and you talk to more people like that, you don't need to worry. You will automatically come across authentic. You will automatically come across as knowledgeable, and you've removed a whole lot of pressure on yourself because it's not about getting the appointment. It's about being of service. So I hope that helps. Now we're going to move on to the second category, which is fear of the unknown, or not knowing. Okay, fear of the unknown or unknowing. Again, it's a common one, but this has got to be probably the second most common challenge that I find that my realtors have. Now, what is this fear? Okay, well, this fear is where you are walking into a situation and you're walking into the dark, and nobody likes the dark because you can't see in front of you. And so this is what ends up happening to us when we walk into an appointment or a door knock or a phone call or an online lead. We are just walking into the unknown. We are walking into a dark, dark room, and we can't see in front of us. So now imagine just for a moment, you're in this dark room. What happens? Well, without being able to see what's happening around you or hear what's happening around you, we have no feedback. And in the absence of feedback, what happens? We as human beings have to fill that absence of feedback, and we fill it with our insecurities. We fill it with our self-doubts, and we fill it with our fears. Yeah, that's what this one's all about. Pretty yuck. All right. So why do we have that fear? Well, it's really simple. We don't know the outcome. And so we create this whole reality that may not exist because we don't know what we don't know, right? We're walking into an appointment. We don't know the people. We don't know how they're going to react to us. We don't know what questions they're going to ask us. We don't know the outcome. All right, now how do we overcome that? And it's actually quite simple. I've got a couple of tips here for you. I've got 3 of them actually. Number 1, be prepared. So when you go into a situation, make sure that you have all the paperwork that you need. Double check, triple check it, whatever. Make sure you have the documents all lined up and ready to go. Make sure that you have your presentation ready. Be it like some people like using paper, some people like doing things digitally, whatever it is that you prefer, just make sure that you are prepared. Be prepared with stats, be prepared with information, drive around in the area. If you're unsure about an area or a listing that you're going to and you're not familiar with the area, drive around. You know, I think being prepared has got to be one of the best ways not to get over the unknown, but at least to have a security blanket as you walk into that dark room. Okay. The second tip is practice what you're going to say. I do this a lot. We talk about role playing. You know, you don't have to role play with anyone. You can do a video on your own. You can practice a presentation in front of the mirror. You can, you know, voice record yourself. Today we've got the technology. And if you don't, or you don't feel like it, just go in front of a mirror. And I know that sounds and feels foolish, but I'd rather you feel foolish by yourself or with a colleague that you're role playing, or with me as your coach, as opposed to feeling foolish in front of someone and exasperating that fear of the unknown. So be as prepared as possible. And of course, practice, practice, practice. Now, last but not least, what's the biggest challenge, of course, of the fear of the unknown or the not knowing? And that is as we walk into a dark room. Now we sit in this room and it's dark and we don't know the outcome, right? So we're walking into an appointment. We don't know the outcome. Okay, well, this is where we've got to be mindful of our mindset, and you got to protect your mindset at all costs. You can actually create that for yourself. What is your expectation of that meeting? Okay, is your expectation of that meeting to get a listing, or is that expectation of your meeting, you know, to get them to buy a home, or is the expectation of your meeting to be of service? Is your intention to be of service, to answer any questions that they have? Because I assure you, when you set the outcome and you know the outcome is going to be, they're going to have questions for you and you're going to listen and you're going to be there and you're going to support them as much as you can. And if you're the right agent for them, then you proceed. And if you're not the right agent for them, you refer them to someone else. So you set the outcome, you set the expectation of how that situation is going to unfold for you. Okay. All right. So I hope that helps. Now we've got one last category, and that is feeling unmotivated. Let's check that one out. Okay. The last category, which is feeling unmotivated. Oh my goodness. And that again is another common one. Thankfully, it's not the most common one because we'd really be in trouble if it was. Feeling unmotivated. Now, some people will call it, oh, I'm lazy, or some people will say I'm a procrastinator, right? I'm sure we've all called ourselves that at one point in time or another. Well, why do we have this challenge with feeling unmotivated? You know, and it is not because you're lazy, and it is not because you're a procrastinator, but because there is an underlying fear or concern. Now, before I take it to that point, you do want to ask yourself, why? Why am I feeling this way? And you could be maybe complacent. You've got enough money, or you've accomplished what you wanted to accomplish, and you're kind of bored with what's happening. Now, if that's the case, and you're bored and you've accomplished and you've got money in the bank and you're very comfortable, well, then you got to reevaluate what it is that you want to do in life and with your real estate business. But if you're feeling lazy and you say, I am lazy or I'm procrastinating, that is actually fear. And when you're being frozen in fear, and when I say frozen in fear, it sounds super dramatic, and really it's not, but that is exactly what is happening. You're frozen in fear. In other words, you're not comfortable with the next steps. you're not comfortable with what needs to be done next, or you're feeling overwhelmed with the tasks. So you want to do the task, but you feel overwhelmed with them. And then you have this big ball of ideas and all stuff all intertwined, and emotions and thoughts, and they're all meshed into this big nasty ball. I call them bees in my bonnet because if I had a whole bunch of bees buzzing around in my head, it would be painful. And sometimes when we get overwhelmed, that's what it feels like. So now that we know what and why that we can tend to feel unmotivated, what do? And it's actually a lot simpler than you think. You have to start to replace the feeling of discomfort with comfortable. And so when you sit down to do the tasks, you do want to make sure that you're in a comfortable place, and maybe by yourself. Like if you're uncomfortable to get on the phones, right? And you're in an office and everybody can hear you, it's okay. Sit in your car and make the phone calls. Nobody can hear you. And that way, then you have only yourself, to be concerned about. The other thing is baby steps, right? So what you really want to do is break down the tasks that are in front of you that you need to do, and you do one at a time. Okay, just one at a time. While you're going through this uncomfortable task, you want to make sure that you feel comfortable. Like I said just moments ago, you want to make sure that you feel comfortable. So let's say you're sitting down to do some telephone prospecting, or you're going to be calling your online leads, and you feel uncomfortable to do so. So grab yourself like your favorite cup of coffee or a latte, or really nice fragrant cup of tea. Sweeten it if you need to with honey. You know me, I will not condone sugar. But do something to make yourself feel comfortable while you're going through an undaunting task, or what feels physiologically like an undaunting task. We get frozen in fear because the fight or flight kicks in, and our subconscious mind does not know the difference of us feeling uncomfortable because we're about to call a whole bunch of online leads versus us getting approached by a bear while we're walking down a path. Physiologically, it reads it the same. So what we need to do is to remind the machine that it is safe and comfortable. So we have to overwrite that program. And that's why I say, do something to make yourself feel comfortable. So maybe it's a nice cup of coffee, latte, tea, fragrant, whatever it is, aromatherapy, your favorite comfortable chair as you do the task. Just make yourself comfortable so you can switch out the feeling. Okay. So hope that helps, guys. One thing I do want to say to you guys is take the little steps. Doing something is better than doing nothing. And eventually what you find, if you do just tiny little things, even if you don't do one thing a day, you do one thing a week, one day you lift your head up and you are there. And guys, I look forward to seeing the realtors that are sitting deep down inside of you, booking all of these appointments and making all the money that you dream of.